الحين presentation بعنوان مدن المستقبل بين الآن تقديم Miss Patricia Floresi, the Vice President of Global CTO for Sales in EMC.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Patricia Floresi. Before you start wondering where my accent comes from, I am originally from Brazil. My mother tongue is Portuguese. I used to be Brazilian until July last year. During the World Soccer, I became German, if you follow soccer. And the Italian last name, like everything else in my life, is my husband's fault. I am here to talk a little bit about smart cities, but I would like to start talking about digital transformation. We use the term of digital transformation coming from everywhere. And there are many definitions from Harvard Business Review, from Forbes, and from many other places that is the movement towards becoming digital. We at EMC believe it's much, much more. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you think about the hospitality industry, you see companies like Marriott, Hilton, Starwoods. These are companies that have huge market caps. They have presence in almost 100 countries. They have 180,000 to 200,000 employees. And they can actually make available to you about 715,000 rooms on a yearly basis. And then they were completely disrupted by a digitally transformed hospitality offering from Airbnb that has absolutely no properties, but can offer you 2 million rooms, including 1,400 castles for you to stay on. It has only about 800 employees and no liability because they don't have any costs whatsoever. So this is a comparison here. The market cap for Airbnb is believed to be as much as Hilton, twice as much as Starwoods. Okay? You can say it's another example. Looking at the payment industry. First you started with the banks, and then came the credit cards, and both of them were completely disrupted by a digitally transformed way of payment. You today talk about PayPal, Google Wallet, and many others. Another oddball, look at the automotive industry. You have names like Ford, GM, BMW. And what happened? Tesla, Elon Musk, firstly disrupted with a car that is completely driven by technology, completely driven by software. With Tesla, you can actually control via software the height of the battery so that it doesn't touch the asphalt. You know, in an electric car, you don't want to cause a touch of the battery in the asphalt because it can catch on fire. But even if you put the Teslas alone, because besides being an all-electric car and all software-driven, it still looks like a car. You look at Apple, and you look at Google, and you look at the movement that the government in the United States is going through to actually focus on bringing innovation on software-defined automated cars. So for us, actually, digital transformation is not just a movement to become digital. We actually believe that digital transformation is a process to rethink and redesign absolutely any aspect of your business, from what is the role of the employee, what is the role of the customer, what is the business model, what is the software, what is the application, every single aspect of the business, and smart cities are not an exception. We view smart city as exactly that, a call to action to rethink how the public sector works today. So we need to survive the digital transformation, and the first piece of news in my agenda is a campaign to actually embrace digital transformation. By the way, this was the first topic in my agenda. I actually don't tell you what I'm going to tell you, because then you decide when you're going to read email on your mobile. I will tell you what I told you, not what I'm going to tell you, and that was the first topic in the agenda. So far, so good? So now let me actually go through some other aspect This is the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I am assuming that many of you have seen and you have become in awe with Michelangelo's painting. Now, why is that important? This is one of the few pieces of art whose artists didn't have to die to be recognized. Savary was one of the major critics of the time, and he said, you know, it's near perfection. There are awe-inspiring details that nobody needs to see innovation, nobody needs to see invention. He captured them all. Why am I bringing this up? Because number one, it must be very frustrating for the other painters of the time because, you know, there was no innovation to be done anymore. It was just copying. But because there is a huge similarity, between how the Sistine Chapel was built and the IT projects of today. And you know, one of my daughters asked me, why am I always drawing an analogy between everything we see in life and IT? And I answer her because, number one, that is, and number two, the reason why you have a twin sister is because I believe in batch processing. So in any case, if you actually look at the similarities between the Sistine Chapel, it took 5 years and one painter. And that's how we do IT processes today. It's very long term. It is single-threaded. First of all, the Pope had asked to actually paint 12 figures. By the time it was done, Michelangelo had painted over 300. That's what we call scope creep. The customer gave him a freedom to choose any Bible story that he wanted. There were one too many use cases, so it's based on a trust. The customer doesn't give a precise RFP. The customer has that base of trust. And it was the whole ceiling or nothing, and that's what we call in IT waterfall approach. At the time was called Paintful, but you actually go through the entire process before you get any feedback. The problem with this approach is not conducive to actually getting feedback from the customer in real time. When we do IT projects today, and smart cities are no exception, you actually need to act as a startup. And if you are acting like a startup, you have 9 out of 10 chances of failing. Why do startups fail? Reason number one is they typically build products that nobody wants. That's reason number one why startup fails. So what are they doing? They are engaging on a continuous experimentation process. They engage on continuous innovation. They actually put 2 versions of the same product, it's called A/B test, in the market, and they see which one is being most used. They actually innovate as fast as they can. And how fast? Amazon actually launches a new update every 7 seconds. AWS, every 7 seconds, is actually testing customer feedback. Reason number 2, and by the way, they don't experiment only with the technology, they experiment with the business model. How many of you have heard about Uber? Very, very good. It's a car-sharing model. There is a company called Lyft, based in California. The logo is actually a pink mustache. Lyft existed 10 years before Uber and never capitalized the popularity of Uber. Why? Because the business model was actually different. You didn't have to pay for a ride. You actually volunteered whether or not you wanted to pay. And number 2, it was based on the notion of friendship. If I am going from point A to point B, I would publish my route, and if somebody wanted to go from point C to point B, and C was on my way, they would publish, and I would give that person a ride. It never caught on fire as much as Uber. Of course, Uber also had an aggressive business model that we call it, they don't ask for permission to innovate. They innovate, they get punished, and they ask for forgiveness sometimes. And who has heard about BlaBlaCar? BlaBlaCar exists in Europe, and my relatives actually use often. And it is based on the idea that you don't want to ride alone. So you're going from Spain to Portugal, and you don't want to go by yourself. That's the name BlaBlaCar, because you find a companion that is going to talk to you over the ride. And the idea is that you actually put a price. So people are experimenting with business models as much as they are with the technology per se. And why we need to do that? Because not every IT project can be the Sistine Chapel, or we are going to be eaten alive. And honestly, not everyone in IT is Michelangelo-like. So the other reason is that the order is changing. I talked to a financial bank, and he said, I need to bring innovation. And how do they need to bring innovation? Thank you. How do they need to bring innovation? They said, first, I care about time to market. I actually am willing to pay a premium in price if I can go to market faster. And once I can go fast to market and I can pay a premium, then I will worry about scope. I don't need the whole ceiling. I don't need the whole chapel before I go to market. I have to go to market first, and I have to experiment and learn. So there is a mind shift around continuous innovation on the business model and on the technology. So the piece of news that I have for you is that we must continuously innovate or be left behind. The third aspect is that the reason number 2 why startups fail is because when they actually build something that customers want, it catches on fire. But they cannot scale at the speed that they need. So the reason number 2 is that we actually have to innovate, but we have to innovate at speed and scale. In the US, when we want to scale, we maxize it, right? It's actually called supersize, but it comes from McDonald's as maxize. In IT, we took the opposite direction. We went microsize it. And now, all we talk about is this notion of microservices, which are small, tiny services encapsulated by an application program interface, an API, and that it gets deployed as a container. And why do you do that? To gain speed and scale. And of course, there are so many new technologies out there, and you want to embrace them all. So the third point in this presentation is that you not only need to continuously innovate, but you need to be ready for speed and scale. So where does this bring us? If this is what is happening in the world out there, let us now take a look at smart cities. Smart city is just but one component of a much bigger movement that is happening out there. And the movement is the need to survive urbanization. What is happening is that we are going to have, in less than 5 years, 10 billion people. In less than 40 years. By 2050, we are going to have 10 billion people on Earth. We are going to have 2 billion cars, and 54% of that population is going to live in cities. So we either learn how to use our resources optimally, or we will not be able to scale. Smart city is only but a small portion, the bottom portion here, of a movement towards digital living. Digital living includes the connection of every single aspect of our lives. The wearables that we use, the cars that we drive, the houses we live in, the schools we live in, that are supported by an infrastructure that we call smart cities. And what are the challenges of that? Is that every single dot that you actually see is generating data. And has resulted in the phenomena that we call big data, which for me is a very simple definition, is anything that breaks your infrastructure of today. So if you believe that with what you have today, you will be able to handle the speed, the magnitude, the volume of the data that is coming in, you are off to a bad start. The first assumption is to say, yeah, I don't have what I need. And the second one is to actually understand the difference between business intelligence and big data analytics. Business intelligence actually looks at the past to predict the future as a continuum. You look at how much you spent last year, and you project how much you're going to spend this year as if you had absolutely no influence in what is happening around you. With big data, you actually want to understand the correlation and the causation between the several data points that you have, so that if you know that when A grows, B grows, you actually influence the growth of A to trigger the growth of B. Let me give you an example. In Amazon, when you actually try to buy a book, the first thing that Amazon tells you is, these are the other books that people that bought this book also bought. Correct? I don't know if you have this experience, but it will tell you. Now, what am I? A loser? Absolutely not. I want to buy that book, and I want to buy the other books that people that bought this book also bought. And what has Amazon actually understood with the use of big data? That we humans behave as our behavior is highly influenced by the behavior of our peers. We say in English that birds of a feather flock together. Birds of a feather flock together. So if I know that somebody else is in my group, it's behaving a way, I will honestly try to mimic that behavior. And that goes exactly into the concept of smart cities. When we actually give you the electricity consumption on your household, and you have no idea what is the electric consumption of other people in the same neighborhood, other families of the same size, and other people of the same socioeconomic conditions, we are not giving you any information at all. When we put you in context of your peers, that's when we have the ability to influence behavior. So big data is actually the analytics that will give you that correlation and causation between variables and the insight that you need to change culture, to change behavior. And one of the examples is the police system now being used in the US, where instead of actually being reactive is proactive, where it can use predictive analytics to identify when a crime or a circumstance will come. Smart cities need to embrace the emerging technology trends. And what are they? Number one, they need to be open. It's open source, it's open data, it's open government. They need to be agile to enable continuous innovation. They need to be software-driven to capitalize on the economies of scale. And they need to be data analytics-driven. And on top of that, you have to be able to secure the system. So let's take a look at the day in the life of a mayor. The mayor now has this issue that he needs to build a smart city. He has three constituents: the citizen, the businesses that he wants to enable, and all the other public entities that he actually manages. There are cities with over 40 public agencies under the same mayor. And the mayor is saying, I am paying 40 times the price of IT. Because every single one of those agencies actually have their own private data center. And that costs a lot. Now, number two, the first thing that you need to do is to actually instrument the city. You have to put smart meters. You have to instrument the traffic lights. You have to instrument the buildings. You have to instrument the cars. The second one is that, yes, you have to migrate all the services to the digital world. The CIO of the city of Boston has said, if you need to come to the city hall, we welcome you. But if you ever show up, I failed you. Because there should be no need for any human being to go to a public office in person anymore. Number 3, we need to be transparent. The government needs to make available any data it has that belongs and it was generated by the public itself. It needs to be often an open source and an open government. It needs to break silos. Today in the United States, it actually happens that you break the asphalt to change the electric wire. You break the asphalt to actually change the telephone, and you break the asphalt to actually change the landline, and the public works actually doesn't know that it only needed to break it once and get it all done at the same time. So there are a lot of inefficiencies that need to be fixed, and the only way that you can streamline operations is by actually breaking the silos, and the only way that you can correlate between one and another is to actually bring all the data together. The other point is that you have to optimize the utilization of resources. Resources are finite, and the total consumption of resources are actually the sum of the individual decisions that each one of us makes. And we have to make those decisions publicly available so that you can obtain a more collective result. And last but not least, the smart city of the future is a smart city that actually engages the customer, that actually engages the citizen, engages the business, and engages the public entities to actually collaborate and work together. So, on top of everything, we say, hey, have no fear, technology is right here. But then we talk about all these big words to a mayor: digital transformation, mobile security, big data, hybrid cloud, software-defined data center, hyperconverged. And we ask the mayor to figure it out. So we believe that actually we should use a different approach. Our function as a technology vendor, as EMC, is to actually tame complexity, is to actually take the problem from the perspective of the mayor, not from the perspective of a technologist. And how do we do that? We create actually a solution. We hide away the details of the internals. And as far as the mayor is concerned, this is the 3 things he needs to learn about. Number 1, we offer a platform, an engagement platform to build the smart city on top of. This platform is completely open and accessed via a set of APIs. And we control security by understanding the role that each citizen, business, or agency or public entity actually plays in the system. This system is open to take data from any source, from IoT management, from build management, from cars, from any sensor that you may have available. And this platform is also open to make that data available to any consumer. First of all, you have the window to the city, which exposes all the information that you may need. And then you have personal dashboards that we empower the citizen, the business, and the public entity to build, and the business dashboards that they can actually build with metrics. And up to this point, this is all the business person needs to know. Underneath, there are, of course, many layers. A data lake layer for all the data, an infrastructure to actually ensure that you have a scalable cloud environment, and at the top you have a platform as a service. And these are the products, and this is what we spare you from. Okay? So this is typically how the demo looks like, by the way. This is one of the dashboards. We don't believe that we are going to give you the right dashboard that you need. We will give you samples, and then you decide which dashboard to use. So this is a window where the data that is available has been tagged and classified, and you can look at all the data that has been made available, and you can look at the data that has been mostly accessed. We offer what we call a data market or a marketplace where anyone with the right credentials can come, choose the data, build the application, and upload in the system with a price tag. When somebody uses the application that the innovator uploaded, we can then split the costs between the city and the innovator. We believe that this has given reason to many applications that have been developed. So this is the bike application where you actually select where the system knows where you are and shows you all the biking stations available and the best route to achieve there. We show actually your consumption of water, electricity, and telco in the context of everything that is happening around you. What is your historical trend? And how much people in your neighborhood or on the same social band or on the same family size is spending, so that you can actually know how you are doing in relation to your peers, borrowing the concept from Amazon Books. We actually do predictive analytics. Based on the consumption of a neighborhood over the years, we can estimate how much they will consume next month. And we use several formats of the dashboards. This is information about traffic conditions, and I could go on and on and on. The main point I want to make is that smart city is about accelerating the cycle between the need to digitally transform the public sector, to actually translate that into a solution, and translate that into components that drive the cycle to digitally transform faster and faster. So the last point that I want to talk about is the need to get started, the need to engage. I have some final thoughts here. If you believe that this is not happening, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Some places are ahead of others. This is the government of the United States. It launched in late October, less than 2 weeks. What are the 9 areas of priority where the government is going to invest millions and millions and millions of dollars in the next couple of years in research? Smart cities are at the dead center, even if you don't consider clear energy and energy-efficient technologies or advanced vehicles as part of the overall movement. The United States is doing that, but is actually adopting a new methodology. Why? Because they realize that 90% of the projects are actually underperforming. They are either significantly over budget, significantly behind schedule, or they make the number one mistake why startups fail. They don't deliver the value that the user wants. The government of the United States spends $84 billion every year in IT, the government itself. This is twice as much the venture capital companies invest in new startups. And this investment is not for mission critical, these are life critical operations that are going to a severe digital transformation. So in order to tame complexity, it's our duty of the technology companies not to expose you to the details, but to expose you to the solution and the path is ahead. We believe that business and vendors together are much better. And together, we can actually do things that no one else can. So please, let us change the world one digital transformation at a time. Thank you very, very much.